PSD EdTech Coaches Podcast Season 2, Episode 2. Flip the script. It doesn't have to be I do, we do, you do. Ways to boost students' productive struggle with Instructional Coach and special guest, Vicky Frey.
Welcome to the PSD EdTech Coaches podcast for educators by educators that love to equip teachers, ponder, and discuss current issues and climate in education. And your hosts, Dan Hopman and Steve Stuckey.
All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, wherever you are, thank you for spending your morning, afternoon, or evening with us on our EdTech Podcast Season 2, Episode 2. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Dan Hopman.
How are you guys all doing today? I hope you guys are relaxed. I know we've had a lot happen this week, and I think we're almost ready to dive right into things because it has been a busy, busy week.
Right. We have a special guest that we're going to introduce in just a minute. One of the instructional coaches for Palmdale School District, Vicky Frey, person who I've worked with, I hate to say, over 30 years, which ages both of us, I guess. You don't see her on the podcast, but she looks much younger than I do. That is for sure. So let's just sort of get this going here a little bit. And I had been doing some pondering lately. And I decided that myself, and I want to encourage many of you to also let go of your EdTech FOMO, you know, that fear of missing out, that you need to have every little tip and trick and try every little application that's out there to become an engaging teacher while you're online. Well, I'm letting go of that FOMO. I'm not feeling guilty about it. In other words, it's no-mo FOMO. You know, believe it or not, I have never made a Bitmoji classroom. I have never even been on TikTok. And I don't even feel bad about it. I've just chosen to put my time and effort in different places. Could I create one? Sure, if I really had a desire to do that. And honestly, I applaud those teachers that have taken the time to make some interesting and or cute ways to curate their online learning experience. And of course, I don't want anyone to infer that I mean that those teachers aren't putting time into the delivery of content and teaching students just because they have cute Bitmoji classrooms. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I've chosen not to worry about making it cute. There are also a whole lot of teachers really just hanging on when it comes to remote teaching. Some of them are at the end of their rope. They're feeling overwhelmed. And I'm saying if that is you, don't keep comparing yourself to those who are doing those cute things in their digital classrooms that you haven't the desire for or even the skills to do yet. You do you. Your kids, they are not missing out because you don't have a wonderful Bitmoji classroom. You go and work on the substantial things. Work on being a good online teacher. And I know that this time of remote or distance teaching and learning seems overwhelming. And it is going to be overwhelming if you keep looking at the big wide picture of what you need to do rather than breaking everything up into smaller learning chunks. And then when you do that, it becomes even, if you actually don't, wait, let me try that again. I'm not cutting. But I'll say this, rather than breaking up the learning into smaller chunks, which you should be doing, by looking at the wide picture, it all becomes even more daunting. If you keep comparing yourself to others and feel that you or your students are missing out, you've got a problem. Don't think you need to do it all. Learn one thing. Use it with your kids until you are comfortable with it, and then add something else. Put something out there to see what the kids can already do. Work from there. But all the while, and most importantly, make sure that the technology serves your learning objectives instead of the tech driving the learning. Your students aren't going to remember your cuteness or your cute classrooms. They'll remember that you care and are enthusiastic about them and the content that you've delivered, and they'll remember what they've learned. Dan, what do you think of that?
You know, I think it's absolutely true. I think, and I know it's much different than a regular year where we would have all of our set things that we would do, but I don't think our students are going to remember that one Bitmoji classroom that my teacher had. They're going to remember the weird year they stayed at home and did learning at home. So I completely agree with you about that. And I know we've had a lot come down the pipeline over the last few days. I've seen teachers just literally just break down because they're so exhausted. They've gotten a lot on their plate. And I know it's a lot. But let's remember to take a deep breath. I think that's really important. And sometimes we just need to stand up and take a walk. We know that you're all working your tails off. I know you are. And I know the people above us know that as well. So take that walk. Be strong and courageous. Don't be frightened. Don't be dismayed. You got this. It might be something new. It might be something that you've never done before and you don't know what to do. But just remember, step back. Take a breath, go at it again. But remember, we're here for you. Your EdTech coaches, and not just your EdTech coaches, your other coaches as well. We have EL coaches. We've got tips coaches. We've got people here to support you. So yeah, I don't think that the students are going to remember Bitmoji. They're going to remember that strange year they stayed at home for school.
Yeah, people need to cut themselves some slack, don't they?
Well, and you said many times, we ask for grace from our students. We try to give grace to our students. Same thing with our parents. We try to give grace and accept grace from them. But we need to do that with ourselves as well. You know what? And I've worked with you a long time, Steve. And one of the things you've always said is do one thing, do it well, move on. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to step back and really look at that one thing, do it well, and move forward.
So speaking of that one thing, we should bring in our guest, Vicky Frey, here in just a second. But I'd like to say, and I mentioned it in the intro, that I've known Vicky for over 30 years now, and we had worked together a couple times at the same site. What I really admire, and I don't want her to feel, all gushy about this, but she's the silent one who thinks about what she's going to say before she says it, which is so the opposite of me. I mean, I'll blurt it out and let it, fall where it may, and people can then try to pick up the pieces, and we can try to come to some understanding. So when Vicky actually butts in and speaks, I listen because she's thought about it. She has something good to say, and that's why it's probably pretty neat that we bring her in today to talk about ways teachers could become not only good online teachers, but good teachers, period, with the topic that we put out, that it doesn't have to be the old model of what we've always said, I do, we do, you do. She has a different way of looking at it. So let's bring in Miss Vicky Frey.
Hey, Vicky, how you doing?
Hi, Dan. Hi, Steve. I'm doing fine. It's been a busy day and been in and out of classrooms and working with teachers who are feeling very overwhelmed. And I agree with what both of you said about stepping back. And they really need to step back and see what they've accomplished just in the last 2 weeks. I mean, they had 2 weeks with a minimum day, and then they had this is their first full week, and now they have a break, thank goodness. But they need to step back and see all that they organized and they put together for those students, because from my point of view, what I've seen, those students are there and they're waiting for their teacher. And it's like, regardless of the kind of platform or all the ins and outs they're using, as Steve referred to, those students are there to be taught, to be asked questions, and a lot of them want to give answers and share out. It's been pretty remarkable. There's been more students online, in my opinion, and there's been a lot of students sharing incredible things. The learning is happening. They're getting into discussions. They're trying to find the academic language to work with the teachers. And I just really get taken with that. I get a little emotional when I see some of those kids really endeavoring to take part in all the different discussions and learning that those teachers are doing. That's what I've been seeing for that. And I just want the teachers to give themselves credit for what they've done up till now, definitely, because it's quite the accomplishment that they've done.
This is a huge wall they're trying to scale. It is.
And what I see going on now, though, too, with, the stress levels are going up, is now that they're either back into it, or for our new teachers that I coach, they're kind of getting ramped up in the content, and now they want to make it as if they were in class. They want to get to that kind of situation, and they can't. They have to keep using their Google Classroom. So just like you said, they need to step back, look at it, prioritize what they want to teach, what's coming next, and see how they can input it in their classroom and how they want to deliver it, and not worry about, what it would look like in the regular classroom, or not try to make it look like it was in the regular classroom. So they need to step back and kind of realign themselves with what they've done for the last couple of weeks so well.
And they also need to take a look at that different point of view that they have never really had to have. They've always had just their own point of view in their classroom, and now they need to step back and really look at how they present their information.
Right, they do. And we're doing it different ways. Some of them are doing it through Google Slides. They're using other things, Nearpod, I've seen. But the one thing that it's been good to see is that the teachers are actually doing a lot of the delivering with a lot of visuals, the simple slide approach, not putting too much information on a slide, getting the students to input in the chat, unmute themselves as they can. And they're pretty excited kids. I really can feel the excitement that's coming across when they get that learning from those teachers. And the teachers are doing a really good job of calling out their names, knowing the interest of the kids, and it's just kind of a neat thing to see that they're remembering who's got the iguana, who does this, and whose grandma is doing what, and they're bringing that in because those faces light up and they smile. And the coolest thing I saw too is I saw a teacher have her kids, first graders, take a break, and my gosh, they were all back in 7 minutes, every single one of them. That was pretty neat.
So have you noticed?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, we dove in deep really quick, and we never really found out who Vicky Frey is. She's telling us all this great stuff that she's seen, but there's a lot of people. The district has grown in the 34 years that we've been here, or 33 years, something like that. So, Vicky, we're going to give you a moment just to tell everybody who you are and what's going on.
All right. I moved here from Montana with my husband. He got hired in by Rocketdyne back in 1985, and the big aerospace boom and building boom was going on in the Antelope Valley. I think there were 7 elementary schools and a couple of middle schools when I got here, and now there's over 20. So it's just ballooned up. But I was hired at Tumbleweed Elementary School later in the year because they had over 40 kids in the kindergarten classes. So I was a kindergarten teacher for 9 years, I believe. Then I did 4th grade, and then I did 3rd. 3rd grade was the one that I just really liked a lot. I did that for many, many years, and then I decided to go and coach adults. I found out that working with teachers and all that into the curriculum and the ways things were changing as they did for a while there. I know Steve and Dan came on to Tumbleweed. Well, Steve, you were there in the early years.
Back in the day.
And then you went elsewhere, I think Mesquite, to teach. Okay. And then came back during our SIG grant in 2010, and that's when I found out that working with teachers was something I liked to do, because we had so many changes and we had to really work together under that grant, that I enjoyed doing that. So I decided to become a TIPS coach for the teacher induction program. And now I support 15 teachers in year 1 and year 2 programs to get through that program, and how challenging that is doing it online. However, we're making it work. We're finding components that fit into the program that answer the requirements from the state. And it's turned out to be workable, very, very workable for that. And now I work with so many people that are just amazing. I work with Diane Johns and Win May and Nancy Olguin, and it's just been great working with them in this capacity and supporting teachers and brainstorming ways to help these teachers get through all those different levels that they have to get through to become a clear credentialed California certified teacher. That's big.
Well, you know what I really appreciated, and you brought up that SIG Grant 2010, was just that nobody at that school was teaching on an island, period. You could not even be there at that site if you were going to go hide in your classroom. Couldn't happen.
I remember Giselle Fullwood, when she got us all together and we did a couple things that to me, that campus felt like a young, vibrant campus. Like we were all just out of college and idealistic and willing to work in what way suits the students best, suits the program best, and being open to that, and kind of watching how we all taught through that and making everybody better, as we worked together as a group. It wasn't just trying to raise test scores. We were actually making our teaching practice better and sharing all these different ideas, because so many of us had not worked together and we were all pulled together. It was just probably 3 of the most dynamic years of my career.
One of the teaching practices, since you brought up teaching practices, that has often been used and endorsed is the practice of the I do, we do, and you do model. And you're here to say that there might be something else beyond that model. Is there a place, before you tell us what that other thing is, and I'll let you go from there, but is there a good place where we do the I do, we do, you do? And then what is the flip that you're going to talk about?
Okay, this has been around for probably almost 20 years, and it is a good scaffold type technique to use with students. But what I've seen through the years is that it gets pretty, lack of a better word, stunted. That when the teachers take the kids into the task, they tend to not really gradually release. They tend to stick to a lot of scaffolds in there, which should be in there. But then they tend to just walk them through, and then kind of let them go without any kind of facilitating, coaching, monitoring as they start to get independent. And when they get to the final task, it's so complex that even though they did some I do, we do, you and I do, and then you do type things, it doesn't really get to be an independent skill.
I see a lot of the I do, we do. I do. Oh, now you got to go ahead and do it.
And so I read this article type, because a lot of the teachers I coach want to implement that. So what I read this article is about leveling up or walk through expertise. And what it is it's still the same type of concept where you're going to actually teach and model and do think alouds and let them know really what goes into a learning process. For example, let's say that the outcome is going to be comparing 2 texts, 2 literature texts, 2 articles, 2 stories, whatever is coming out there. But you start with them comparing and using academic language, saying comparing 2 restaurants or 2 sports, 2 types of sports, something that's really relatable that they can get into and start using the comparing and contrasting skills with. And then you level it up to maybe who's going to run for class president? What can we have for a class president or a class pet, which would be better or not, that kind of thing, comparing that. But you're always keeping those same skills that you want them to have at the very end of the task, those complex skills that they're going to need for assessments to fit the standards, to always be integrated into every level that you're working on with these students on these easy to understand subject areas. But you're wanting to keep the strategies in there. You want to have, if you have a rubric for the final, you want that rubric front and center and saying how they're meeting that. And then every time you level it up, you gradually back off and let the students do some coaching and getting the kids to say, okay, we're going to compare, for example, characters now. Now we're getting more into the literary sense. We're going to compare character A and character B and all the ways that they want to compare them and how that is important and what's the reasoning for that. Then going up and doing maybe 2 partial articles. And then the final piece is actually doing 2 stories that they need to really map out and compare and contrast, but they've already done that on all these different levels with different supports in. And the teacher is very much in the very beginning, and then just sort of the coach and facilitator, pulling kids out if they need a little extra help, but letting a lot of the students coach and facilitate themselves. So there's lots of monitoring. You have to realize that once you're getting them to the you-do level, there's just monitoring. You're not teaching, you're not giving them the information, but you're watching to see how they're synthesizing it and applying it to the final task.
So you had shared with Steve and I the article that a lot of this is coming from. And what I really enjoyed about the very beginning of the article is the way they equate that with video games, because that's what you're describing is almost exactly how our kids use video games. Can you explain a little bit how that article used the video games as an example?
Yeah, I did like that, but I'm just not a video game player. So I was sort of like, okay. I mean, I was back in the Super Mario days with my son. So they just talked about how, and guys jump in if I don't quite articulate it well here, that in a video game,
hold on. Understand, I'm as old as you are. Dan is the gamer. He's the young one.
I'm the young one.
Dan, okay. All right.
Okay.
So when you start in a video game, you have obstacles that you have to sort of get skilled at getting through. Some are easy because that's going to keep you, interested and keep the playing going. And then all of a sudden you have a little more monsters. You have to start to problem solve how you're going to get through these things. And you fail, and then it kind of, gets you started at the again, and you start to learn and get better at each level. And then when you finally get through that level, that's just a feeling that's like, woohoo. And then you start the next level. And I see this in teaching, and I see this with students. All of a sudden, there's this huge sense of discouragement because you just can't get through that next struggle. But with the video games, they kind of give you some scaffold, some help to get you through just enough that you're going to take on that big monster, that big chasm you have to jump or problem solve across, and start using the skills that you did in level 1 and the ones that you've started to develop in level 2 and go through the next level. And then, of course, you're all excited. But then if you get into something where, you're leveling up and it's a little more abstract type of a concept, that's like the 3rd level. Now you have to sit there and go, okay, what am I going to build on level 1 and 2 and work through to get better at level 3 so that I can get up to level 4? It kind of creates that momentum. They also compared it to basketball, that if a coach takes a team and they do dribbling, and then they do shooting, but they never combine how they would work together and then work with defense and offense type of thing all together, they would never be a team and be able to play well together. So as teaching, we need to, at the beginnings of I do and we do, make sure we're keeping complex tasks involved there with support. So when we get to the final end, it's not just, put my head down on my desk, I don't know how to do this.
Right. And I think also that the idea that the teacher has to hold all that knowledge is a falsehood, because once you've done some of that, the kids have background knowledge. They've learned some new from you. And now, as I tell kids, and they don't understand it, when I say the smartest person in the room is the room, and I'm done teaching you right now because there's 30 other kids in here that might get it, or maybe 10 of them do. Ask and talk with the people in the room. Learn from each other. You don't have to just keep relying on the teacher. It's a freedom as a teacher to be able to work around the room now and see what kids are producing and doing and thinking, because you're not so busy answering every little detailed question that they have. The kids can help you.
Right, and that's when you become you have them become facilitators and coaches. And you go around and you listen, you see what they're doing, you comment, and then sometimes you can have the 2 groups share out what they've done to help build on that and show, where they're reaching out. It's like you guys have said before, let the kids do the heavy lifting. The
ones doing the learning should be doing the working.
Yeah, right. And have students, have group, A, really articulate what they're doing that's good to the other groups, because A, that helps that group too to articulate what they're doing, and bring it in on how they're getting the 2 characters compared, and they've come up with a whole new way of looking at the two characters and how it's a good thing or it's a bad thing and why, and how they're using evidence to back that up and how they're putting it together, that kind of a thing, and letting the kids run with it because they can. They really can on all different levels. We've seen it in the classroom. I've had groups, especially my last couple of years of teaching, because we were kind of upping the game here, and where, you know, I just walked around the room, and the third graders were all milling into, I mean, they were holding each other accountable. They were getting the work done. They were trying to figure out, what was the big thing? Rubrics were really big on how it fit the rubric, and they would all kind of argue, where are we on the rubric? Well, I think we're here. Well, no, I think we're more here, you know, and then the egotistical one, you know, who knows it all, you know, tries to prove it differently. But it was good. It was good. It was neat to see, and they can do it.
I just want to say, first of all, you explained the video game perfectly. So nicely done. No, for me though, it's, and I'm gonna go back to using the video game because I have little kids, and and when they do play, it's fun to watch them because you can see them, especially when they get struggling with a level, how they work together to overcome the level. I don't say a word. I may have played the game. I may not have played the game. They're not YouTubing how to do it. They're discussing, hey, have you done this? Have you tried this? And it's that discussion where it's them doing the work, no one else, where they grow. Because then when I go to play and they're telling me, hey, don't forget, you have to do this, I know they've learned it.
Okay. I guess what this is, and the video game is a good example, is you're not doing part by part by part and then trying to put all the parts together in the end, because that is overwhelming for anyone. It's trying to keep all the parts mingled together with each step of the lesson that you want to take them to, that's going to reflect the final task.
So how do teachers do this, or how can they do this? What subjects can they do this in during this distance learning teaching time?
Well, I think the comparing two stories that they've gone through, two science phenomena on that kind of thing, on how they're going to compare those. I think I see a lot of opinion writing going on now. And so I think if you want to take them through the steps of opinion writing, you need to take them through the entire picture of an opinion on something pretty knowledgeable to them, and start pointing out all the different components of their opinions and applying it to writing, and then picking it up and maybe with a piece of literature or something in social studies. They're doing a lot of government and social studies right now. They could take two parts of parts of the history they're doing in the government. There's judges, and then there's, you know, Supreme Court people, and they could compare those, or I'm getting confused here. Do an opinion on that and bring it into the text version, the informative text, that type stuff, and opinion. What's their opinion on it? Make sure that they're matching what they did in the very first one in the next level, and what they match going on up into comparing or doing an opinion on, you having a cell phone. You know, what are the rules around having a cell phone? I'm trying to find something that's right there. And so the cell phone thing is good. And then they're actually going to write an opinion over whether or not they believe, I think it's fourth grade, something in there. The teachers are planning to have them write an opinion over one of the informative text stories in their consumables in Benchmark. And so they're trying to get them to that level, but they're keeping it all together in these easy to understand steps. And then it gets a little more complicated and a little more complicated. But like you said, it's tough for them to use all that in distance learning, but they're starting to bring in discussion points for the students to discuss. And then they're going to try to get those students to build on all the other students' responses. And they're going to put up slides that have responses and say who would like to give, their thoughts on this thing. And then I think they're going to have a little bit of a point system to try to build up the points. There's no punitive part of it, but it's like, okay, we had this many people contribute. We had this many people contribute here, and sort of kind of get that momentum going.
You had mentioned somewhere that you were thinking about using Parent Square to get some word out. Can you tell us about that?
Okay, I think that what I was starting to segue into is, where would I put that? Parent Square. Oh, I was trying to think about giving feedback on things through Parent Square about how, I guess, their students were doing. I think I got into a giving feedback type of channel there in my mind, that using Parent Square and pop-up pedagogy that I've seen in Dr. Fisher's book, about giving feedback back to the parents on how the students are doing, making sure that they're keeping up certain types of the learning. I'm really drawing a blank here on Parent Square, but I'm sure if I go back through my notes.
But what's really neat, and now that I'm listening to what you're saying about it, because I wasn't quite sure what you meant either, was this idea, though, that you just brought up of letting the parents know quickly, short, how their kid's doing and what great things they did. I mean, it takes almost no time to sit there and say, hey, Mrs. Hopman, Dan was participating so well during our Zoom class session today. That was awesome. I mean, something as simple as that builds things up, and then it could become, hey, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Hopman, Dan was engaged in those questions and really showed some depth and insight into what he shared with everybody else. People learned from what he said.
Right. And I think, I just the breadth of what Parent Square can do, you can really give a lot of good specific feedback on those students, what they've done in class, and to kind of keep that student motivated to contribute and to add, and then maybe actually, be more involved with their asynchronous work because they got that kudos from the teacher, very specific, very much on what they're going to do, that they're probably a little more motivated to do their independent work and do it well.
And it does become quite successful. I in the past have called parents at the end of the day, may I speak to Mr. or Mrs. Hopman? This is Mrs. Hopman. I go, well, this is Mr. Stuckey, Danny's teacher. And it's like, what their first response is usually, oh God, what did he do?
What did you do?
And then I sit there and say, I want to tell you what a great thing he did today. And they're blown away. When you start bringing the kids in and talking about the good things that they do, they are more likely to put that cognitive effort into whatever it is in the classroom, synchronously or asynchronously.
And that's probably why when I was rambling at the beginning of this, saying it was neat to see teachers really identifying with their kids, all the time, boom, 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 boom. In a classroom, I think that kind of identifying might be overkill. But in this setting, it wasn't overkill. It was so good that they were saying the names over and over and over and thanking them for answering and thanking them for taking a risk and thanking them for doing this, because you could just feel more kids coming on when that was going on. The other thing I was going to mention here too is we're talking about flipping this a little bit, but another, and I can't remember the article this came from, but I know it was on Edutopia, about where somebody shows the class the final project, the final result, not the actual answer, but something of where they're going. And then they ask them to look at it and break it down and think about what they need to know to put it together. And that's something you could do online with the whole group. Show the final expectations that you want. Ask them what they think they might know. You're going to find out perhaps if they've already got some of the skills that they can articulate it. So you can say, okay, there, we don't need to spend a lot of time. They've already got that. Let's move on to these other ones. And it's kind of like a simple polling of your class on what they think they need to do to write an articulate summary that can fit this rubric, or write an opinion piece that fits this rubric.
It's like giving them a pretest, but with a product. Say, here's what I want.
Right, but sometimes with just this discussion, they're not worried about, my pretest is going to be low because I'm not going to know anything. This may be more of an open discussion on it type thing. You can just kind of get your data and things with that on what your kids already know, because that's a big challenge right now, is that we're supposed to say, okay, if they've already learned it, don't spend time. But then the assessment of what they know is a challenge for these teachers. A lot of them are doing writing samples, They're doing math samples just to kind of get a feel of where their students are, because we need to move forward.
And like you said, I think the feedback is the most important part so that the students can grow.
Oh, it does. And, you know, there's a place in the distance learning playbook that has feedback ideas. And the one was this pop-up pedagogy. And it's like where you, that is for the asynchronous learning. These things just pop up on the comments, you know, where you put that, but your comments are echoing what the child should be doing. They're specific and they're positive. They're not just, oh, good job. Oh, you forgot to put a comma here. But it really pushes to what the purpose of the learning was, that they wanted to do that. And I think that's where Parent Square comes into. That's like, you know, so-and-so, like you said, Dan did a great job on talking about the Supreme Court article. He was reflective. He knew it in depth. He was passionate, that kind of a thing, to being a pop-up.
Yeah, I think sometimes we worry more about capitalization and punctuation rather than responding with more questions that get them to go deeper and to think more and to be able to write in more depth as well.
Right, and I just thinking, right, and it's meaningful feedback.
And that takes them through that whole walkthrough strategy, because you're starting here, and through that feedback and your questions and comments, they are gaining more and more complexity into the process that they have to start adding in, and before they know it, they're doing it.
Yeah.
And not only that, I'm going to go back to the video game part, because I think it's just a great analogy.
I know what you're doing all weekend.
No kidding. I got 3-day weekend coming. When the kids are playing video games, they're getting instant feedback. It's meaningful throughout because they learn as they're going. And when their character dies or they crash or whatever it might be, they know that they've got to start over and they need to improve on what they've done. I mean, to me, that analogy, and again, it might be my age that's allowing me to relate to that, but it really does make a good analogy for our kids about that meaningful feedback.
And it lets them know that you know what they're doing, and that the effort they're putting into it is being acknowledged, kind of keeps them motivated, primes them for the next level, and away they go. Yeah, they do that.
So here's my question. It's going to be a little bit off subject. I mean, just a tad, but how much confidence does the teacher have to have? Because I know you deal a lot with the new teachers. How much confidence they need to have in their own abilities to be able to pull, I don't want to say pull something like this off, but be able to implement the idea of that release to the students and move forward with a strategy like this?
Okay, well, I think, it is difficult. I mean, it's challenging. I shouldn't say it's not difficult. It's challenging going through the content and prioritizing, especially if you've never taught the content before and it's all new to you and it's put out a certain way, and know, how do I do that, is to go through and always look at what you want them to do at the end and kind of keep that in mind. What is the final test or the final product that you want them to do, and what it's going to take to get to that, and then work with the curriculum and of course your grade level to come up with little steps to get there. And it's not going to be perfect. You're going to work through it and try to do as much prime teaching at the beginning, and then try to give it to the students a little bit more and a little bit more. And if you think, try it. And if it doesn't quite come out as perfectly as this little model that we're talking about, that's fine. You're getting your feet wet. You're trying risks with your kids. And I think the students work with that okay and fine. I think they start to actually learn how to learn and get into the struggle. And it's just that we just want them to have that knowledge. And so doing all that leveling up type stuff, they actually keep the knowledge, and I think the skills a little bit better. But you would really need to have a partner. I work with them. We do the lesson planning. We go through a lot of the components. We try to watch that we're not just walking them through every different parts of the level on getting to the final task.
Well, when you allow students, or even myself when I'm trying to do something, you're absolutely right. I have an idea of what the end product should be, and you really do have to build up on skills in order to complete some of these projects, whether it's educational or physical projects as well. You have to keep leveling up based upon what you've learned along the way, and that's learning right there in a nutshell.
Right. And so they can do it, and they can do it in a real, it doesn't have to be super complex, and it doesn't have to be super multi-layered. It could just be writing a summary. How's that going to look at the very end to have a very good summary using academic language in it? And then starting off sort of, in a simple summary using the language that goes along with that topic. Another topic might be a little more complex, using the right kinds of language in that, and finally getting up to where you're going to talk about, the fall of the Roman Empire and how that fell apart and what were some key components of that.
Coronavirus, I think, was the cause of the fall of the Roman Empire. Just saying.
Steve is absolutely right. When Vicky talks, I just want to listen even more. And sometimes I'm getting wrapped up with what you're saying, because I do think there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And I think you're exactly right. Vicky, thank you for the time you've taken to join us. I mean, it's outstanding.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking me. I appreciate being here. I enjoy your podcasts. I enjoy your opinions. Very muchly given. All right.
And their opinions, they're just like holes in the head, right? Oh, boy. So, hey, but, Vicky got on here because she heard us say, if you would like to be a guest on our PSD EdTech Coaches podcast, to go to palmdalesd.org/edtech. And on that front home page, there's a place where you can click and fill out a form and let us know that you would like to be a guest. You have something that you would like to share with people within the educational realm, whether it's technology or curriculum. It doesn't matter to us. Feel free to share your opinions as well. We're all good with that.
Thank you, Vicky, for taking the time, and have a great 3-day weekend.
Thank you. You too. Everybody get a lot of rest and just
yes.
A lot of rest. I don't know if that's in existence, but I'll try to get rid of the bags from under my eyes. And Dan, is there anything else that we need to let anybody, at least within our district, know if they've made it to the end of this show?
No, the only thing I can tell you is if you guys need anything, contact your EdTech coaches.
And contact your other instructional coaches, your ELD
Absolutely.
coaches. They're all there to help you reach the kids. So until that, I guess we can say that Season 2, Episode 2 is now in the books. So keep yourselves clean, healthy, and get well rested.
Wear those masks.
All right, that's a take. It's cut.
No, it's still playing the outro music. Once the music stops, then we're done.
We need to add that to our pre